Plundered. Episode 6. Altaussee. Art beneath the mountain. Deep inside an Austrian mountain, thousands of paintings, sculptures, books, and cultural objects were hidden from the war above. The place was Altaussee. It was not a secret fortress built by the Nazi regime. It was a working salt mine with a history stretching back centuries. Beginning in 1943, its tunnels were used to store cultural property as bombing threatened cities, museums, and surface repositories. Among the objects brought underground were works connected to Adolf Hitler's planned museum in Linz. Others came from churches, museums, private collections, and different Nazi acquisition systems. Then, during the final weeks of the war, explosives were brought into the mine. The popular version of the story presents a last-second rescue by the monuments men. The documented history is more complicated. Local miners and mine officials acted first. They helped prevent the destruction of the repository before Allied cultural officers arrived. Altaussee lies in the Salzkammergut region of Austria, surrounded by mountains and lakes. Its underground passages offered protection from air raids and relatively stable storage conditions. But the mine was not a modern museum facility. Paintings and sculpture still faced risks from rough transport, moisture, unstable tunnels, and poor packing. The mine protected the objects from bombs. It did not guarantee their safety. As shipments arrived, crates and artworks were moved into chambers deep underground. The scale was enormous. More than 6,000 paintings were found there, alongside books, sculpture, furniture, and decorative objects. It is safer to describe Altaussee as containing thousands of paintings and many thousands of additional cultural objects. The repository is often described as Hitler's art collection. That is only partly correct. A large part of the contents was connected to the Sonderauftrag Linz, the program assembling artworks for Hitler's proposed museum. But not every object in the mine belonged to that project. One painting may have been confiscated from a Jewish collector. Another may have been removed from a church. Another may have been purchased through a transaction shaped by persecution. Another may have belonged to a German museum that moved its collection underground for protection. Two objects stored in the same chamber could have completely different histories. Among the most famous works found at Altaussee was the Ghent Altarpiece, also known as the Adoration of the Mystic Lamb. It was created by Hubert and Jan van Eyck in the 15th century. It was a major work of European religious art and an important part of Belgian cultural heritage. Michelangelo's Madonna and Child, commonly known as the Bruges Madonna, was also found inside the mine. The sculpture had been removed from the Church of Our Lady in Bruges. The mine also contained works associated with artists such as Vermeer, Rembrandt, Rubens, and Dürer. But famous names should not define the importance of the repository. A family portrait, religious object, or small piece of furniture might have had little international fame, but enormous personal meaning. Cultural value is not measured only by price. By the spring of 1945, Nazi Germany was collapsing. Allied armies were advancing from the west. Soviet forces were moving from the east. Government authority was breaking apart. The art stored at Altaussee was trapped within this atmosphere of panic and uncertainty. The mine protected the objects from bombing. It also created a new danger. If explosives were detonated inside the tunnels, the entrances could collapse and the collection could be destroyed or buried permanently. August Eigruber was the Nazi Gauleiter responsible for the Upper Danube region. Post-war investigators and later accounts attributed to him an order to destroy the repository before Allied forces could seize it. Large bombs were brought underground, reportedly hidden inside crates marked as though they contained marble. The exact chain of orders must be described carefully. It is safer to say that the destruction plan was attributed to Eigruber than to claim that Hitler personally ordered every artwork destroyed. The mine was still an active workplace. Local miners and administrators understood the tunnels and knew what normally entered the site. They also understood what a major explosion could do to the repository, the mountain, and their livelihoods. Mine personnel became suspicious of the crates. They discovered the explosives and began organizing resistance to the destruction plan. This was not only an effort to save famous art. Destroying the mine could also have devastated the local industry and the future of the community. The miners faced serious danger. Nazi authority was collapsing, but officials could still arrest or execute people accused of disobedience. The intervention involved several workers and administrators. It should not be reduced to one heroic individual. Working together, they removed the explosives from the chambers holding the art. They then used controlled blasting to block important entrances. The purpose was not to destroy the mine. It was to prevent Nazi officials from returning easily to carry out the plan. Popular films sometimes suggest that Allied officers entered Altaussee while bombs were connected to a ticking detonator. That version creates suspense. It is not the strongest historical reconstruction. The available evidence indicates that local workers had already removed the immediate threat before American cultural recovery specialists began their work. The rescue of the artworks began with local action. The Allied recovery operation came next. American forces reached the Altaussee region in May 1945. Combat troops first had to secure the area. The monuments, fine arts, and archives officers depended on soldiers, engineers, transport units, intelligence personnel, and local guides. Robert Posey and Lincoln Kirstein were among the first Allied cultural personnel to inspect the repository. They entered through a narrow opening and confirmed what lay behind the blocked entrances. George Leslie Stout later became a leading figure in the recovery operation. Stout was a professional conservator. His expertise was essential because removing art from a mine was not simply a transport problem. A wooden panel might crack, a canvas could tear, a sculpture could be damaged by vibration, a weakened crate might collapse while being moved. Inside the mine, the scale of the task became clear. There were tunnels, storage chambers, crates, and rows of artworks. Some paintings remained packed, others were placed on racks or leaned against underground walls. Before moving anything, the recovery teams needed to document what they had found. An object could carry several identifying marks. One might come from the original family or museum, another might be connected to the Linz project, another might have been assigned at the mine. The Allied teams then created their own recovery numbers. Every label mattered. Removing a sticker or separating a painting from its crate could destroy part of the provenance evidence. The officers photographed objects, recorded identifying numbers, and assessed condition. Military engineers reopened the blocked passages. Local miners helped navigate the tunnels. Soldiers provided security. Drivers and laborers moved crates. The recovery was never the work of a handful of art historians acting alone. The works were removed gradually. Each object had to be identified, packed, carried through the mine, loaded onto vehicles, and transported over roads damaged by war. Much of the recovered property was sent to the Munich Central Collecting Point. There, specialists compared the objects with German inventories, confiscation records, photographs, and national claims. The collecting point reversed the purpose of Hitler's planned museum. The Linz program had gathered objects under one dictator's authority. The collecting point attempted to separate them according to origin and ownership. The Ghent Altarpiece returned to Belgium. The Bruges Madonna returned to the Church of Our Lady. These famous returns became symbols of the recovery effort. But not every object followed such a clear route. A cathedral altarpiece had a recognized home. A painting taken from a murdered family might have no surviving inventory or immediate claimant. Some owners did not know their property had survived. Others lacked the documents required by post-war authorities. Recovery meant the object had been found. Restitution meant it had been returned to the lawful owner. The two were not the same. Altaussee was an extraordinary success. The mine was preserved. Thousands of objects were recovered. Major works returned home. But the story should not become a perfect rescue legend. Some ownership histories remained unresolved. Others entered national custody and became the subjects of research decades later. The mine preserved the physical objects. It did not automatically repair the injustice connected to them. Altaussee reveals several important truths. Nazi cultural collecting operated on an enormous scale. Local workers played a central role in preventing destruction. The monument's officers depended on soldiers, engineers, conservators, drivers, and miners. And finding an artwork was only the beginning of its return journey. Deep beneath the mountain, the art survived. The records then had to answer the harder questions. Who had owned each object? How had control been lost? And where should it be returned? In the next episode of Plundered, we investigate the monument's men and women, the specialists who tried to protect cultural heritage in the middle of war, and helped process the enormous collections found after Nazi Germany collapsed. This is Plundered, an investigation into Nazi looting and the search for justice. Created by Gregan.